Looks like we have everybody into the room. Arvin, over to you.
Great. Thank you very much, Daryl. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Daryl, can you hear me? Oh,
yes.
Wonderful.
Perfectly.
So good evening, everybody. I'd like to welcome and thank everyone for joining us this evening. Okay, it just said recording in progress. We got it. That's good. Yeah, I'd like to welcome and thank everyone for joining us on this snowy night. I know there's probably no place else you'd rather be, but this will be a wonderful meeting because we're going to seek your feedback. I'll first provide you with some information and then seek your feedback on the interim findings of the Yonge Corridor Land Use and Built Form Study. So I'd like to start off by welcoming, acknowledging the following members of council that are with us this evening. We have Mayor Frank Scarpitti here. We have Deputy Mayor Hamilton, I believe. Yes, we do. We have Councillor Colucci, Councillor Irish, Councillor Keys, and Councillor McAlpine. So welcome all members of council for joining us. And just let me make sure if there's anybody else. I think I got them all. There you go. All right. We begin this evening by acknowledging that we walk upon the traditional territories of Indigenous peoples, and we recognize their history, spirituality, culture, and stewardship of the land. We are grateful to all Indigenous groups for their commitment to protect the land and its resources, and we are committed to reconciliation, partnership, and enhanced understanding. This evening's meeting will introduce the draft land use and built form concepts prepared for Royal Orchard, Clark, and Steele Station areas as part of the Yonge Corridor Land Use and Built Form Study. This study is the first phase of work that will inform the upcoming Yonge Street Corridor secondary plan process. I look forward to hearing your thoughts on the draft concepts and continuing the conversation when we initiate that secondary plan process. So now I'd like to turn it over to Daryl Lyons. Daryl is the Senior Manager of Policy and Research at the City of Markham, and he will introduce tonight's agenda and the consultants team. So Daryl.
Okay, thank you, Arvin. Good evening, everyone, and welcome. I would especially like to thank all of you for taking the time to join us this evening. My name is Daryl Lyons, and I am the Senior Manager of Policy and Research at the City of Markham. With me this evening are city staff from Policy and Research, Transportation, Development and Urban Design departments. We also have staff from our consultant team, Urban Strategies, that has been working with us on this study. Please note, as you heard at the beginning, that this session is being recorded and live streamed to YouTube. So please keep off your webcam if you want to remain off of camera for this event. As Arvin explained a moment ago, the Land Use and Built Form Study represents the start of a comprehensive secondary plan process that will be undertaken along the Yonge Corridor for Steeles Avenue to just south of the Holy Cross Catholic Cemetery. This study was initiated in response to council direction to determine the transit-oriented potential surrounding the Royal Orchard, Clark, and Steele Station areas as an initial phase of the Yonge Corridor secondary plan process. We presented the interim report and presentation to Development Services Committee in the fall of last year. The feedback you provide tonight will help inform this study and also assist in identifying options and areas for further review as part of the Yonge Street Corridor secondary plan that will be undertaken as the next phase. We anticipate wrapping up this study in the next few months and reporting back to Development Services Committee. For tonight, we have an interactive program planned that will leverage innovative collaborative software called Miro that will show the land use concepts and allow for real-time feedback to be captured on the screen. Craig Lametti, partner at Urban Strategies, will start by providing context and introduce the interim land use and built form study findings. After each station area is presented, we'll pause and switch over to Miro to receive your feedback. There will be a bit of a delay as we go back and forth from the presentation to Miro, but please be with us for that. So if you wish to comment or ask questions through this event, please use the raise hand button and tool, which you can find by clicking on the reactions at the bottom of your screen. But I should also note that the raise hand, it may be in a different location if you're using an iPad or a different piece of software. Sometimes it's under participants and then raise hand. So just depending on which software and hardware you're using, it'll be in a slightly different spot. One of our facilitators will then call on your name at the appropriate time when we see the hand raised. And as a courtesy to other participants, please mute your microphone and turn off your webcam during the meeting unless you're called upon. I'm now going to hand it over to Craig to begin the presentation. Craig?
Great, thank you very much, Daryl. And I'm going to share my screen for everyone here. I just want to make sure I'm sharing the right screen.
Yes.
Great, thank you very much. I think Daryl covered a lot of this that you see on the screen just here, but again, we want to thank you for taking the time to be with us here tonight. The meeting is being recorded, and I think Daryl gave the instructions as it relates to raising your hand and dealing with your webcam and microphone. So thanks once again. With that, I'm going to get into the presentation. Again, this is the land use and built form study, the community information meeting for the work that was done. The presentation tonight is going to give you a quick overview of the study background, why it is we're doing this, the development context, provide an overview of a series of principles that were really used to guide the study itself and inform the decisions that were made. I'll take you through each of the station areas, the massing that was created and some of the strategies that were deployed as part of that work. I give you a bit of a development summary for the entire corridor, and then conclude with a series of areas for future study. And again, that's actually a really important part of this, which is that the lessons we are learning, the feedback we're getting from you tonight and through others throughout the course of this project are really helping to inform and scope later more detailed planning that will be undertaken through the secondary planning process. So again, we're very appreciative of the feedback that we're going to receive from you tonight and that we have received throughout the process. Just a little bit on the study background itself. Obviously the Yonge North Subway extension is a very important project which is coming forward, which is going to extend the TTC Line 1 service all the way north through Markham and into Richmond Hill. The latest plans, and these things are all ever evolving, include 4 stations along an 8-kilometer extension of the line. And most recently, you'll probably recall in the summer, July 16th, Metrolink announced that Clark Station would be included as the 4th station, along with Steeles, Bridge, and High Tech. It's a transformative project. It's really going to make it a lot faster and easier for people to travel between Markham, Greater York region, and the City of Toronto. So it's going to bring lots of improved mobility and accessibility for people living and working along the line. But it also creates an opportunity to shape the sorts of communities that we live in along the line as well. And I think that's a big part about what we're trying to test through this work that we'll be presenting with you here today. This was covered briefly, but I'll go over it just once again. The land use and built form study was really based on council direction to accelerate the work around these 3 station areas with a land use built form study and really learn from the testing of different building types and how we might integrate a range of different uses to really help to inform the scoping of the secondary plan study. So the work that was completed and that you'll see a lot of tonight included the development of a 3D model of the entire corridor, preliminary built form and massing concepts, where we were really looking to test what would it be like to create a more transit-oriented built form, thinking about how that could integrate alongside existing communities. Think about how it could be a complete community that accommodates a range of not only new people, but also opportunities for employment, improved connectivity, improved park space, and other sorts of critical community amenities. So those are all sorts of things, the sorts of things that were tested through this process. We're going to be showing you that work tonight, and you'll see that there's a lot of new development there. And what's really important to note is that illustrates a full long-term build out of the area. These things don't take place overnight. They take place over a longer period of time. And that's really what this study will be illustrating when you see different massing concepts. Secondly, is this will be informing the upcoming Yonge Corridor secondary plan process and updates to the City of Markham's official plan. And again, I can't reiterate this enough, this is why your feedback is really important, and we appreciate that your time that you're taking tonight out of your busy lives to come and participate and provide your feedback on the study itself. Just a little bit of an overview of the development context. Planning and development is guided by a whole series of different policy layers that happen at the municipal level, they happen at the regional level, and also at the provincial level, and they help to guide the choices about where development occurs, what it looks like, and how it integrates with a range of different uses. All three levels of that guidance, the provincial, regional, and municipal, all support a mix of residential and employment uses in close proximity to transit. Very importantly, what they also do is they prioritize the development of complete communities, places where people can walk, bike, take transit to get to wherever they have to get to meet their daily needs. And importantly also, they prioritize these areas for human services. So parks and open spaces and community centers that really help to contribute to the quality of life for people that are living along these areas. The Yonge North subway extension is going to be an important corridor to accommodate this residential and employment intensification. And there's certainly quite a bit of it that's planned. So currently Markham is projected to accommodate about 120,000 new people and about 50,000 new jobs by 2051. And a lot of that will actually occur along corridors such as the Yonge Street corridor, where there is a significant investment in transit. It's also important to note that the Steeles, Clark, and potentially Royal Orchard areas represent major transit station areas where a lot of this growth is being focused.
Okay, as the slides are moving on, I just wanted to sort of interrupt for a quick second and introduce Councillor Ray. Welcome to the event. Craig?
Great, no, thank you. And feel free to just jump in anytime if people join. It's appreciated. So a bit of an overview of the corridor today. As many of you probably know, it's a very diverse corridor. There's a mix of residential, retail, service, and employment uses that exist here. And while there are a lot of auto-oriented developments with large areas of surface parking, there's also a lot of other types of characteristics. We've got older established neighborhoods and more mixed use recent developments such as the World on Yonge, which combine not only living and working, but also important shopping and recreational amenities all together to support the corridor itself. East of Yonge Street, what you see are predominantly low-rise neighborhoods, so predominantly house-form neighborhoods. You've got older housing stock between Dudley and Yonge, and there's some evidence that those areas are really sort of changing over time. There's some consolidation going on and new development which is taking place. You also have a number of what we call service employment designated areas along Doncaster and Glen Cameron. So those are sort of employment warehousing areas. They have a number of different businesses located along the railway corridor themselves. You also have special places like the Thornhill Heritage Conservation District and two golf clubs which intersect Yonge north of the Clark Station area and create a very special characteristic along the corridor itself. There's been significant change in development which is taking place and proposed so along the corridor. And so there's a number of development proposals that are currently active. Two active applications on Markham side focus primarily on larger parcels. Our study shows only public applications. There are other development applications that are occurring along the corridor in pre-consultation stages, but those aren't really illustrated as part of this project tonight. And we also know that there's significant development proposals in Vaughan at Steeles. I want to emphasize that as we go forward and we start to show a number of the massing models, what you're going to see is a real focus on the Markham side of things. So we know that a corridor isn't just a single-sided thing. There are two sides to every corridor. This study in particular was focused on illustrating the potential for the Markham side. It was coordinated with folks working at the City of Vaughan, and obviously through the secondary planning process that follows, there'll be much more significant coordination and an understanding of the type of change that is occurring on both sides of the corridor to really help to inform the work that is undertaken there. But I just wanted to make that clear tonight, that what you're seeing is primarily focused along the Markham side, in fact, entirely focused along the Markham side of things. Principles used to guide the study. The thing that was important here was we wanted to not just sort of test, well, what is new development and how much development can you fit along here, but we wanted to say, how could new development in response to transit actually contribute to a number of important objectives? And we use those objectives, or principles, if you will, to guide the decision-making as this work was undertaken. The first was really important one, which is to support complete communities by coordinating not only new development, but a broad mix of uses, public amenities such as parks and open spaces and community facilities, which would be really important to support not only existing, but also future residents. So as we were doing this exercise, we looked for opportunities to deliver new employment uses, and we tended to focus those and integrate those into the base of buildings at stations or near where we have existing or proposed office uses. We assumed that development along Yonge Street would continue to provide retail and services, and so we modeled that in. We also assumed that where you had significant levels of change, and particularly within each station area, we would look for opportunities to integrate new community uses and also consolidate parks and open spaces to create more significant destinations and amenities for existing and future residents. One note on the office development. Office is a very tricky thing. There's lots of factors that go into where office locates and what it looks like. And one of the things that we've identified through this study is that really further study and a market study will need to be undertaken to understand the full potential for this corridor to attract office development and the types of things that would be required to support that. Obviously, it's very important to get employment uses along the corridor, so it's a living and working place for the people that travel along it. The second thing is to deliver improved connectivity and a more fine-grained street network. Just because you have transit doesn't mean it's transit supportive. People need to be able to walk using a range of different modes. So we looked at supporting mobility through things such as establishment of a new laneway network at Royal Orchard in order to support development there, support access to it. New north-south streets at Steeles to help spread the traffic, take some of the load off of Dudley, and generally integration of new streets and blocks on larger redevelopment sites. Responding to the existing emerging context. We know that there's lots of change taking place, and so this work tried to understand the nature and scale of change that's taking place and really put in place something that was responding to that, something that had higher intensity uses located along Yonge Street with peaks at the station, but also very importantly, transitioned down and alongside established neighborhoods. We defined a clear area of change with what we call a bit of a neighborhood seam located generally along the Dudley-Inverlochie corridor, which defined low-rise neighborhoods to the east and would help to integrate new development to the west. So generally, areas of change were located east of Yonge to the west of the Dudley-Inverlochie corridor. And that corridor throughout was treated as a seam that would really help to connect people to various destinations within these neighborhoods, but also help to integrate new development. One of the considerations that I'll talk about a bit further is how we should be thinking about how that street, those corridors are designed to minimize traffic impacts on existing established neighborhoods. And lastly was just considering appropriate land uses in proximity to subway. Again, it's about creating that complete mix of uses and amenities. So we looked for opportunities to leverage redevelopment to deliver new parks, new community facilities, such as libraries, schools, community centers, but also opportunities for things like seniors housing and affordable housing, which could be integrated as part of development. So with that, I'm going to start going through the first of the three station area studies. And I'll spend a little bit of time on the first one just to orient you to the types of things that you're seeing. And again, I do want to emphasize that what you're seeing tonight is primarily massing on the Markham side of things. We recognize that there's lots of change and development taking place on the Vaughan side of things as well, and we've certainly been coordinating with the city around that. But the focus of this exercise was on Markham, and as it goes forward into the secondary planning process, we'll continue to be working with the city of Vaughan to make sure that that work is coordinated together. The first station area that we're going to focus on is the Royal Orchard Station area. And this is an opportunity for a re-urbanized local center, focusing on the Inverlochy and Royal Orchard crossroads with new development lining Yonge. And so there's a number of things that you're going to see in this image right before you that you're going to see in in all three of the station areas. So I want to point some of those out to you. You see the new development there. Those are the colored buildings, and there's a range of different building types. So generally high and mid-rise development is shaded in orange. We've got low-rise development in yellow. And where we've got different uses like office, which we show in blue, or community uses, which we show in I think it's like a teal, we indicate those as well. You see those two big circles on your screen. Those are what we call walking radii from the station. So generally that first circle, you can walk anywhere within there, generally within about a 5-minute time frame. And the second circle, you can really get to within about a 10-minute time frame. So that's just a good way of us understanding how far away are things from the station in terms of how people would experience them. That red dashed line, that is the major transit station area. So that is a designation. And within that area there, the province sets certain targets in terms of the level of intensification and mix of uses that should be occurring there. And so you will see these indicators on all of the different drawings. So I want to orient you to them. Some of the opportunities explored in Royal Orchard, creating a more walkable mixed-use center with new open space, thinking about neighborhood-sensitive redevelopment of the housing York site and how it could fit alongside established low-rise neighborhoods, re-urbanizing the Yonge Street corridor with a mix of high and mid-rise development, really consistent with what we're seeing proposed at the moment, and a number of smaller infill opportunities integrated within the legacy apartment neighborhoods there. We'll present some numbers in terms of the new growth that has been illustrated here, but just for your reference, those numbers are calculated based on these areas within the dashed black dotted lines. So this is a model of the station area today, and to orient yourselves, we're looking sort of to the northwest at the potential Royal Orchard Station site. You can see Yonge Street and Royal Orchard Boulevard are labeled there rather prominently, and then the York Region MTSA boundary and the red dashed line. This here is an illustration of the modeling exercise that was undertaken to illustrate how the area could actually achieve a range of new development and mix of uses and community services. And so I'll orient you to a number of different things here. And again, they're color coded as per the legend at the bottom left of your screen. So we wanted to do a number of things here. We wanted to locate the tallest buildings and towers at Yonge and Royal Orchard Boulevard as part of a mixed-use development with new park space and community facilities, but also make sure that that development transitioned down to established neighborhoods. Obviously, this is something that would need to be studied further, but for the purposes of the study, we applied a 45-degree angular plane from those established neighborhoods to support that transition. There's a number of 8- and 10-story mid-rise developments north of the station area. I don't know if you can see my mouse moving there, but generally in that area up there. And then you see the York Region housing site, a number of stacked townhouses in mid-rise development in closest proximity to the existing low-rise neighborhoods to really integrate alongside those neighborhoods in terms of scale. It should be noted that the alignment of the subway has been changing, and this was created at a certain point in time to sort of understand how development might fit with the alignment at that point in time. But it goes without saying that as that alignment gets locked down, development will respond to the ultimate configuration of that. But this is, again, some testing that we were done, and it's a particular moment in time. There is an opportunity for redevelopment of a heritage site, which you see indicated here with the dashed line. That wasn't tested as part of the modeling, just because that would have to be integrated alongside the heritage proposal there. And that was really a bit of a discrete exercise that we didn't get into as part of the study. Some of the other things that were integrated here, I talked about that Dudley-Inverlochy seam. You can see that here, how Inverlochy would connect a number of new and existing neighborhood parks, but also connect to new community uses located to serve existing and future residents. The redevelopment of the York housing site is an interesting opportunity, and there's great precedent for that from other communities that have taken older housing sites, redeveloped them to integrate a mix of different types of housing with a range of tenures, all in forms that integrate alongside established neighborhoods. And this is an example from the Alexandria Park community in Toronto, integrated alongside established low-rise neighborhoods there. So if you take a look at the new development that was illustrated here as part of the massing exercise, all these sort of colored buildings, what we demonstrated was the ability to accommodate about 4,600 new units, capable of really supporting about over 9,000 new people and 700 new jobs, primarily in retail and service development. If you account for the total population, so that's the people that are existing there, living there right now, and the jobs that exist there right now, that would equal about 14,200 people and jobs within this area. And again, I want to stress that those numbers are related entirely for the Markham side of this station area here. And it goes without saying that there would be future development on the Vaughan side as well that would be captured and accounted for and integrated as part of the secondary planning study. So with that, we're going to go to Miro, and I'd like to be able to take some of your questions for discussion. While I'm transferring over to Miro, I would just ask that you consider a couple things. You know, why don't you let us know, are there anything you like about the concepts we shared for the Royal Orchard station area there today? Are there things that you didn't quite like, or areas that you think are opportunities for improvement, things that we want to consider going forward as part of the secondary planning study? We've tried to show how new development here could deliver new park space, new community uses, a mix of job and retail. But are there other opportunities that development could help to benefit the existing neighborhoods at Royal Orchard? And, you know, if there were important considerations for the secondary plan, what might those be so that we can sort of build that into the thinking and help guide that process going forward? And so with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I am going to start sharing the Miro board. And Daryl or Amanda, if you could let me know if it's actually appeared on everyone's screens. I'm hoping so.
Yes, it has come up.
Great. So thank you very much. And maybe Daryl, if there's any hands, we'd be happy to take your questions, and my colleague Pei will be capturing those on the screen. And if you feel we haven't captured your comment or question correctly, just feel free to let us know, and we'll make sure we get it properly for you.
Okay, so we have somebody named iPhone has their hand up.
Yes.
Happy to
Hi.
hear your question.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
So I was just interested in this. I've lived in Thornhill my entire life. I currently live just south of where I'll be between Clark and Royal Orchard station. I'm interested mostly personally as a parent of young children about the intensification and what plans there will be in terms of community services as well as schools. There is a lack of childcare in this area, and in terms of services from recreation, like from Markham Recreation, that sort of thing. There's not really many offerings. We do have to traditionally travel over to Angus Glen or Cornell to get any of those services. With the influx of people that this new corridor is going to bring, I would be very interested in knowing how all those new people are going to be serviced when we don't really currently have them. We typically have to go east of the 404 to access them. So I see that in this plan, we have the community building. I'm just interested to know what that is. And then from a school perspective, I am a teacher. How are the schools that currently exist in those neighborhoods going to be impacted, or what's the planning that's happening with the York Catholic and York Region District School Board to ensure that there's going to be a capacity in those buildings to, I guess, intake all the potential new residents?
Yeah, those are excellent questions, and I'll try to break it up and take them one at a time. And if Daryl wants to speak to some of the specifics about some of them, we can get into that as well. I think the important thing to note is that with new development, you can't just have development for the sake of development. It has to actually deliver a range of community services and amenities with it. And so that was a key part about the study here, was not just to test putting in new buildings, but actually ask, how could we put in new buildings but integrate those critical community services? And so you see here the community center. To answer your question about, well, what is that? I'll be honest, we really don't quite know right now. It could be a range of things. What we wanted to do was understand, how could we make space, carve out space as part of new developments to sort of support those things. So if you will, that's just a space. As development comes forward, what will take place is a scan, and actually through the secondary planning process, work will be done to understand what are the missing community facilities that exist along this corridor here, start to identify those, and then as projects come forward, be able to work, that'll enable the city to be able to work with developers to make sure that new development is delivering on those critical community services. And so that'll be an important part of the secondary planning process itself. The school boards, what they tend to do is they do their long-term forecasting in terms of their capacity needs, and they're constantly tracking development, the amount of proposals that are coming in, and through that understanding whether they need to expand, renovate, whether there needs to be a school site or whatnot, and they will identify those. And it's a bit of a long process, but if a school board identifies the need for a new school or expanded services, what they tend to do is they will put forward an application to the province to see if they can get some funding to help support the creation of those facilities. So we can't be specific here about how many new schools or how many new spaces we're developing, but what we have been trying to do is make sure that on larger sites, we are showing those opportunities, understanding how they could fit in, and very importantly, how they could connect to the existing community along here. And strategies like the Inverlochy and Dudley seam are very important to help support people and connect them to those facilities. So I wish I could give you more details than that on the precise mix of these things, but we really are just at the early stages here in testing how they could fit.
Thank you.
Daryl, I think you're muted.
Yes, I just noticed that. Thank you. And I see we have Jordan Max.
Okay, thank you. Greg, just a few observations, I guess, and comments. But so first of all, I noticed that you've only got, if my color coding is correct, you've only got one building that is designated as an office building, just south of the Uplands Community Learning Center, and wonder why you wouldn't actually have more that are much more adjacent to the station, at least on the southeast corner of Baythorn and even just north of there. So that's point number one. Point number two is just an observation about a whole series of sort of those mid-rise to high-rise buildings on north of Baythorn. They all sort of seem to be pointing inward to the east, and they're all in that C format. And what I'd rather like to see is less of a wall that they form all along Yonge Street, but much more permeability. So to be able to break those up So yes, I know that there are streets that are permeable in between, but really trying to connect it so that it doesn't feel like it's just one big wall. And my third point was really about I don't know what you're trying to do in terms of interlocking, but I think there's an opportunity here with all the additional population you're adding here is to make use of that strip instead for a significant green space, make use of a bigger tract of land that can actually really help. That's also a way of having a seam that really can provide some much needed recreation facilities and programmed and unprogrammed in that area. So trying to, and I know, there are pockets here, but, trying to make a much larger consolidated space instead of these micro parks that really, you can't do a whole lot in them. So if you want to have a place that actually promotes community, that enables community activities to take place, you need some larger land development, to be able to facilitate that. It doesn't only mean, football fields and soccer fields, but other spaces do need a certain minimum width and space to be able to accommodate other kinds of activity, gazebos and amphitheaters and, all kinds of other things. Thank you.
Great. Those are, most of those are comments, and they're actually very good observations and points. So I really want to thank you for those. I will be able to answer a little bit about the office and why we didn't show more. And you're absolutely right. The success of these areas is actually in getting the mix of uses, along with the parks and the other things that you talked about as well. But getting that live-work environment is really, really critical. One of the things that we've been finding, and my office works across the GTA and whatnot, is that it's actually very challenging to attract office outside of big established employment areas. And so what we've tried to do is learn from precedents from other places of where we've successfully been able to get office. And typically it's been integrated into buildings and take that approach. But we recognize this is something that really needs to be studied further. And so one of the recommendations coming out of this is that there be a more concerted office assessment, if you will, about the types of places that are most likely to be achieved along the corridor, and the types of policies and incentives and other sorts of things that we want to put in place to make sure that we are attracting as much as possible. So it's a very good, very astute observation, and completely agree.
Okay, and I see next we have Joan.
Yes, hi. I understand the question is, what do you like about the concept shared for the station area? Unfortunately, we are deeply concerned over this. There's nothing that we like about this concept. We live on Donaldbank Crescent, which is off of Baythorn. And to be honest with you, if this is what it means to have a transit-oriented community because we have a station at Royal Orchard, it simply isn't worth it. I'm looking at the development along Inverlochy. It's great to put little high to mid-level orange rises on the map. There are people who live there now. There are people who work along the corridor. All those businesses would be gone, at least for the time that it would take to build the developments. So yes, you're gaining jobs, but what about the people who are losing their jobs? What are they, or their homes, for example? So we're actually quite appalled by this. We've been steamrolled by having the subway underneath our community, and now we're going to be steamrolled with this. And to say that you're going to have 0.9 hectares of new park space, that is absolutely ludicrous when you are bringing in an additional 9,000 people into our community. As I said, if this is what it means to have a station at Royal Orchard, take the station, forget it. We're not interested. We've lived here 33 years and things have, this intensification is insane. I won't say anymore.
Okay, no, thank you. And, issues of displacement are very important issues and considerations that need to be taken into account. And also making sure that those jobs and services, get retained so that people living there can continue to access those. So those are very valid concerns. Appreciate that.
Perhaps they should have a tally of the people who will be losing their homes, the people who will be losing their jobs, the people who will no longer be able to shop at Food Basics or the Shoppers Drug Mart, especially seniors such as ourselves. Absolutely ridiculous.
Okay, thank you. I see we have Lewis.
Yeah, hi, good evening. I want to ask if you're considering your modeling traffic, and I'm talking about how many parking spots are you calculating, and what about parking for the subway service? Is there going to be any? I understand the road system is not going to change, so they are what they are, small. And my experience when with the World of Young, I used to use Doncaster to commute, to go to Finch, to drive to Finch. And I found that after they put there, well, it was a long line to cross the Young. So I started avoiding it, right? Just because of the parking of World of Young. So if you're saying that's going to be 4,000 units, I'm not sure what's what the standard they are putting for this. They are setting for this. It's 0.5, 0.1, or 1 car per unit or something. What about the parking? What's going to be the impact of people trying to take the subway there and just driving to there from other places and trying to park somewhere in the area? And how that accommodates in the modeling.
Right. No, thanks, Lewis. This study didn't include a parking component. That is certainly something that would have to be undertaken as part of the secondary planning study. You raise very good points. I think all station areas that consider growth and intensification have to think about how much parking is required. How can we minimize how much parking is required by actually having a live-work place? How do we make sure that people aren't driving to the station and infiltrating and parking and then taking the subway down, all of which can have a range of different strategies as part of them. And I think you've raised a lot of those important considerations. So yeah, no, thank you. Certainly part of the upcoming secondary planning study.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Evelyn. Evelyn? Oh, here we go.
Hello, good evening.
Good evening.
Okay, I would like to remind the consultant that Thornhill was divided in two, yes, but that doesn't mean that Thornhill was not the same. Yes, we are divided in two municipalities, but on the other side of Vaughan, we just don't have one heritage area there. We have a lot of heritage buildings on the other side as well. And I think these high rises, I'm not going to repeat what the other deputants have said, but there is no compatibility with the west side. That's Vaughan. So you are putting like a wall of building, yes, without any concept or any compatibility with the buildings on the other side. And there are houses there. Yes, even if they have a heritage house, two heritage houses, a cemetery. So what is the proportion? It's like something completely out of character for that area. The other item I want to say is that you said that 5 minutes, the consultant said 5 minutes for 500 meters that you could walk, yes? But is it that a senior that walks slower? Is it a person with walking difficulties? Is that calculated? If somebody has to walk, yes, I can walk 500 meters, no problem. But what about the older person that needs to sit down on the way, need to rest, or cannot walk so far? So I think that calculation has to be lower, not the 500 meters that you are calculating there. The other issue that I see is that the parking should be like a long corridor. behind the building. And you need to have a green study. We don't want to be another Finch and Yonge, where you cannot even walk properly. Even by Doncaster and Yonge, if I walk, the people that know me, I am a small person, I can be blown away. So that's very important to consider, because if you want a walkable community, you have to be able and have to be pleasant. Yes, I avoid going to Doncaster and Yonge or to Finch and Yonge. I avoid it. It's so uncomfortable, even Toronto. So I think that's very important to deal with, not just on this part, but on the whole street. Thank you.
Great. Thanks a lot, Evelyn. Good points. I just will say very quickly, yes, I completely agree. You can't not think about the other side of Yonge Street. This study was really just testing the massing on Markham to help to inform that scope of work. But the secondary plan will be coordinated very closely with what's taking place on Vaughan and be illustrating the types of changes. And you can see a little bit in the modeling that some of those developments are captured, but yes, I completely agree with that. And you're absolutely right. The planning does need to consider mobility, and not everyone walks at the same pace. And so a lot of the things that will need to be looked at is how you can improve mobility to and from the station, whether it be through new streets and blocks, whether it be through pedestrian pathways, etc., so that everyone can get access to that amenity. If ultimately there should be a station. So.
Okay, and I'd just like to welcome Regional Councillor Jones, who's joined us as well this evening. And just as well as just to sort of wrap up on that last question as well, something that I'm hearing is a bit of a theme is around the fact of where are the next steps and where is this going as well. And as Craig has mentioned a few times about, this is kind of the preliminary step. This is a study looking at land use concept. Once this study wraps up, just looking at the transit-oriented community, the development, some potential, those pieces, we're going to be launching into an entire comprehensive secondary plan process. And I just want to make sure that everyone hears and understands that. That will be looking at both sides, looking at Vaughan, looking at Markham, looking at all lands along this Yonge corridor, from Steeles up to the south side of the Holy Cross. It's going to be having multiple studies done as well as part of that effort, because we need to look at transportation, which I've heard is a bit of a theme around parking. Needs to look at master environmental servicing. So it's going to be looking at infrastructure, environmental services. And then, of course, it's going to be taking the land use planning elements that you're seeing through this work that our consultant has done to the next level, where we're going to be having to do a lot of detailed work moving forward from this point, and then integrating it with all of those other considerations, from land use compatibility to heights, to density, to walkability, in order to create a complete community for the city of Markham in this area, in order to sort of maintain that, move it forward, as well as look at the opportunity with having a subway coming into the city of Markham. So with that, I'm going to move on. I think the next person I have in line is Marilyn. Good evening.
Can you hear me?
Perfectly.
Yep.
Okay, so yeah, I have found this very interesting. And, thank you, Mr. Lyons, for your comment about where we're going from here. That gives me some comfort, because this does leave a lot of questions open and concerns. I agree with the woman, Joan, who spoke earlier, that there is no real usable green space here. I understand that through the legislation that there is only a certain amount that you can demand from developers. And these little parkettes really don't do it for, I think, the majority of people when you're talking about the kind of intensification that Thornhill is going to be undergoing. So when you talk about that these communities are built out over time, it seems to me that if the city doesn't take green space now, it'll never happen. What you're going to end up with is a lot of tiny, useless little parkettes that nobody can use for anything. So the Yonge Steeles Corridor study from 2008 talked about using Dudley Avenue as a larger green space that the city would actually have to buy land to create. And I think that that's what Jordan Max was talking about along Inverlochy. There are opportunities to create more usable green space, but the city, I think, has to take the bull by the horns and make it happen. Otherwise, you're just going to end up with all of these tiny parkettes that nobody can do anything with. And it's not really usable green space when you're talking about this kind of intensification. So I'd like to see the city, I'd like to understand, and it doesn't have to be tonight, but at some point, I would like to understand how the city, when you're talking about community building, can actually create park space. Because if you don't, it won't happen. And I don't know what it means for Dudley to be a seam, but what I would like it to become is a ring road to keep the traffic infiltration out of that part of Thornhill, and also a larger connected green space. And if people refer to the Yonge Corridor study, there's a very good explanation of how that can happen, even going across the railroad track. So those are all my comments for right now. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you very much, Marilyn. And I hope I can answer some of those as we get further south to Clark and the Steel Station area there. And really do appreciate that. One of the recommendations of this is thinking about how you can have a consolidated parkland strategy to get some of those larger parks. So great point.
Okay, thank you. I see next we have Howard.
He's been waiting very patiently. I've been watching him wait patiently.
That's rare for me. Just a couple of quick points. To Marilyn's previous point, I have to agree with her, which is a rarity sometimes, but and I'm thinking back to a parkland study that was undertaken, I think in 2013 or 2014, that if I recall, one of the consultants who did the study talked about as an alternative to green space, but would still constitute parkland, what was urban parks, cement parks, that if you're creating for office type of environments, even within a generally speaking residential, or in this case residential commercial area, that an obligation could be fulfilled to provide park space, but that it might not be what we think of as green space. It might be cement and roller skating and that type of more urban feel. And I think that, so I agree with Marilyn Ginsburg that if there's the opportunity for the city to actually secure real green space to be used for traditional parks versus that urban type of concrete park that a previous study had discussed in 2013, 2014, I think that would be wise. And maybe somebody can help me here. I seem to recall from my days on council that somebody from the region said that Yonge Street is the second busiest, Yonge as a whole, was the second busiest artery, regional artery in York region. If that's the case, I'm wondering if anybody could tell me what parts of Yonge Street are, especially in the southern area, south of 7, let's say, are more congested and busier than others. And I ask that question because when on council, when we were discussing the then Frangian development, I recall saying it's the thin edge of the wedge. It's the world on Yonge. It's Frangian. There's going to be further pressure at some point in time to continue the building likely northward. And I'm scared that with an artery that, if it is still the second busiest in York region, notwithstanding the subway coming in, you're going to have people. If anybody thinks that you're not going to have folks from elsewhere, Vaughan, Richmond Hill, etc., that can't get good parking right now at Langstaff, let's say, that find any space that's available. And if that's around the food bay, wherever that may be, taking up street space or residential street space in the area of the subway, they're kidding themselves. Anyhow, a couple of questions there.
Great. Well, thanks, Howard. And I think, as Daryl mentioned, transportation is certainly a key component of the upcoming secondary plan process, and that'll certainly be something that's looked at, and certainly lots of issues and questions around it. So, very important thing to answer.
Is there a commitment when, I see the post-its up here about usable green space, that we would actually there'd be the commitment to green space, to real parkland, versus allowing the use of concrete parks. I forget what the actual term in the previous study was, but I think folks know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, Howard, I think the secondary planning process will be looking at the types and mix of open spaces that are desired and appropriate for the community, and help to really define those. This is a massing study, just looking at the range of potential opportunities. So, no commitments coming out of this, but certainly we've got a lot of great feedback on this station. And I do think, I'm also cognizant that we should probably get to Clark as well, because I suspect there'll be just as many thoughts and questions on that.
Lastly, I would just say the comment that Marilyn made about the Dudley Ring Road, boy, that's again a comment that goes back 7-8 years. So I echo those sentiments.
Great.
Okay, thank you. And Craig, you are right. We do have 2 more areas to sort of get through, and I'm just cognizant of our time, and I want to make sure that we can hear from everybody on the other 2 station areas. So if we can continue moving forward would be great. And then as of course, for anyone that has further questions regarding any of these stations as we go forward, you're going to see at the end of the deck, which we're also going to be putting up on our website, you're going to have my contact information as well as our consultants. Please share that information, all of this information, and hearing a lot of great ideas that are really giving us a lot of thought about how we move forward on this. And then of course, inform the upcoming secondary plan as well. Okay, Craig.
Great, thanks a lot, and thanks everyone for the thoughts on the last station area. It is really appreciated. So the next station area is Clark, and it's got a similar sort of coding and coloration as the last plan. So I won't get into too much detail on those, but this is really an opportunity to explore the potential for a new transit-oriented community straddling the 2 sides of the rail corridor. The massing here looks at redevelopment of the larger retail sites closest to the station, and looks at how the larger parcels could be developed in a way that reinforce the existing street and blocks structure, maybe introduces a bit of a coordinated alley to serve development along Yonge Street, and a number of new north-south open spaces. And I'm really hoping that maybe this is going to start to pick up on some of the ideas that Lewis and I think Marilyn might have mentioned, which is demonstrating how Dudley can start to act as a scene to connect these sorts of amenities together, and really contribute from that perspective. One of the things I want to note here is that this does consider appropriate land uses in closest proximity to the subway lines, including employment lands. So there are a number of lands that sit generally to the west of Willowdale Boulevard, which are distinct and unique, and distinct in that they fall both within the 500 and 800 meter walking radii of both Steeles and Clark station areas. And so that means that they're going to be very well served. And so one of the things we want to test through this exercise was how new development could deliver on a range of community priorities, including new community facilities, community center, library, potentially a new school site, parks, new street connections, a mix of housing, retail, and jobs. And obviously, as part of that, you could integrate things such as seniors and affordable housing. Just to be clear on, as we go forward and we show some numbers, where those are coming from. Sorry about that. Those are generally pulled from areas north of the railway corridor in these dashed blocked lines there. So this is the station area today, and I do want to spend a bit of time just orienting you here. We are looking here from the northeast. We're looking to the southwest. So south across the rail corridor to the world on Yonge. You see the Clark Station site indicated there in the note and the York Region MTSA boundary. And then looking ahead, this is just showing the testing of the massing. And I will point out that at the very top left-hand side of your screen, you're seeing a number of developments. Those are existing sort of proposed developments that you see in Vaughan, some of which are under appeal. And then in that sort of really lightish blue color there, a massing from the City of Toronto study, which is currently underway. So that's not the current proposal on that site. That's the City of Toronto study that's underway, if you're wondering what that is. But I'm going to focus us back up here to the north on the Clark Station study area and talk about a number of the things that were tested as part of this process here. And the first is really this opportunity on either side of the rail corridor. And, when you get a larger site like this really does get us the chance to look at how we could integrate a range of different, not only housing types, but also community amenities that can serve the existing and future residents of the area. So we've got new community uses and parkland, which are integrated here, a mix of high and low and mid-rise development types. We've looked at integrating an arts and cultural hub or some other sort of community facility into the base of the building. There's a great example in Yonge and Eglinton of a school also integrated into the base of the building, and they can take advantage of the adjacent park space. So lots of opportunities from that perspective in terms of integrating community uses there. The extension of Dudley Street crossing the rail corridor, and I'll talk about some of the considerations of that later on. But again, this is about supporting improved connectivity within the station area, helping to connect people to various destinations within the station area as well. So you can imagine people from the south side of the rail corridor being able to walk up to Thornhill Secondary School along Dudley Avenue and connect to those sorts of uses as well. We've shown some new office uses here in proximity to the station, both standalone offices, but also offices integrated into the base of new development right at the station with retail at grade. Like the other option, we've shown height peaks at the station, but also in this case along the railway corridor itself. And again, the idea is where can you put new height density mix of uses in a place where you still have space to transition down to those low-rise neighborhoods and integrate alongside of them. We've got new parks and community uses located along this Dudley neighborhood seam. And also we've demonstrated how you might be able to integrate new community uses integrated into the base of buildings there. Taking a look at what was calculated as part of this, this exercise here, and again, just focusing on the highlighted area here on the north side of the rail corridor, what was demonstrated through the massing was the ability to accommodate some 4,900 units, so basically about 5,000 new units, almost 10,000 new people, and 1,600 jobs, primarily in office related jobs here. And you can see some of those opportunities illustrated as part of the testing. If you consider the existing people and jobs within the area, what it would create is about 16,000 people and jobs on the Markham side of things within this area of the the station area. All right, so with that, I'd like to go again back to Miro. I'm going to stop. We've got a number of questions here, things you like, obviously things you don't like as well. We're happy to hear those, and opportunities where we could be thinking of improvement. If the redevelopment of the area along the rail corridor is investigated, what are the types of things that we would need to be considering as part of a more comprehensive development? And we've heard a number of ideas already about larger park spaces, about community facilities, about making sure that it's supporting mobility for people of all ages. So those could be some of the ideas that you'd like to see there. So again, those are all ideas about how development could benefit the neighborhood at Clark. And also, what are some of the most important issues for the secondary plan to consider for the Clark Station area? And again, this study is really about informing that upcoming planning process. So if there's things we want to carry forward, please let us know, and I'm sure you will, and we look forward to that. So I'm going to stop sharing here. I'm going to switch over to the Miro.
And while the Miro is loading, I just would like to ask as when we go through questions, if people can turn on their video if possible. But when you're done your question, if you can turn it off, we're just trying to maintain for bandwidth for others, as I'm hearing that some people are having some bandwidth issues. Okay, and I see our first question is Evelyn.
Okay. The same questions as at Roy Orchard, but I have the first issue I have is all those trees that we know you cannot plant so much trees. I think artist rendering has to stop putting trees where you cannot put trees. They don't exist. They are never going to exist. We have seen this on Wardon Yonge. Nice trees, even on the where it's the lockers. You know, I have a original. What they propose, there are no trees on the site. There are trees on the borders, but not really that people can use. I would like to ask if the consultant had been on Wardon Yonge.
Yes, yeah, we have. Wardon Yonge's a very specific sort of condition where you've got parking below grade, which can make it a little challenging sometimes for trees to reach maturity. But there are lots of different ways that you can plant trees to grow to a really mature level. So I think what I'm hearing is skepticism about being able to get mature trees, but I want to just confirm that, because I think it would be good to get good trees. You just want to make sure that if trees are planted, they can grow to their full scale.
Yeah, but even when you put all those trees on Dudley Avenue, it's like they don't plant so many trees. It's artist rendering. So just don't do this anymore. I think it's too high. Yes, we had a talk. Our residents association had a talk with Mayor Frank Scapiti a couple of years ago, when we said, please make something that is beautiful, that is remarkable. Then when somebody comes from North York and they go into Thornhill, that, oh, we are in Thornhill. Yes, otherwise we are going to be Toronto very soon. And we had asked, okay, do something, that is a classic kind of architecture, but that brings something that's different. Yes. The other question I have is like Glen Cameron. Yes. It's a road with a lot of business, small business, that will not be able to afford the new buildings, the rentals. So we are sending them where? If you want to go to the mechanic that is there, or to the flower shop, or to even the same thing happening on Doncaster. So you're just putting residential, but you're forgetting of the small business that are not going to be able to have, like the mechanics, the health store, the bathroom pieces that we have there, right? It's a very convenient for us in Thornhill where we use. So where is that? The petrol station is not there anymore, the corner of Estel, I think, and on Clark, where I know people are going to have electric cars, but we still have, and we are still going to have petrol. Where is the petrol station? Yes, it's where are the small restaurants that are on Yonge Street? So it's too high. It's not applicable. The consultant said that there is entertainment and sport facilities at Ward Young. I don't know about it. I don't think any of the residents go there to any facilities of entertainment there. There's nothing there. It's just the supermarket, the hotel, and some offices. But in reality, there is nothing there to be. It's like an island. Yes, we don't consider it part of Thornhill. On the original study of Yonge Street, was it taking that in consideration? That it was like 1 or 2 years of work. Was it anything considered from that?
Yes, actually, that study was certainly referred to through the, I'm assuming it's the massing and density study you may be referring to, but yes, that was taken into account as part of this. And I think you raise great points around making sure that new development creates opportunity for small business, supports things like restaurants and entertainment uses along Yonge. We want to make sure that we have trees that can grow to maturity and nice looking places. And I think certainly through the secondary planning process, figuring out what is a distinct characteristic for this area that distinguishes it, it would be something that would be good to consider as well.
When we go to Paris, let's say, we know, okay, that's Champs-Élysées. And you probably know Corbusier. So he did, it was like controversial at the time. People didn't like it. Yes, but it was something. It was high density with nice for your eyes, with the boulevard trees that you can walk from one point to the other. Do the same behind those buildings and lower the height. That's like a concrete jungle.
Okay.
Okay, thank
you,
Evelyn. Just in cognizant of time, if I can move on to Jordan, I see you have your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Rich. So really, 2 questions and a comment. So first of all, in terms of those high-rise buildings, what kind of heights are you envisioning in terms of numbers of stories? So we get some perspective on that. That's question 1. Question 2 about the overpass, the CNR overpass on Dudley. Is that for pedestrians only? Is that a car traffic as well as pedestrians and cycling? And that last comment around the future of sort of that Glencairn and the other side in Doncaster, I think you have to remember also a certain amount, employment is not only in the office and high-end stuff. It's also, that's a unique area because you've got, yes, warehouses, but those are almost like a sort of cluster theory that they, for people who want to be able to shop and pull up there, and there's employment there, and it's a kind of unique area. And I'm thinking there aren't too many areas in the city that still have an industrial base like that it could actually be built up even more with a little more identity. So I'm thinking of on close to Yorkdale, you've got Cartwright, you've got a number of lighting stores, right? And if that's the place where you want to go for lighting supplies, then you've got an umpteen choice of different places, and they see the value of being proximate to each other. So rather than only seeing it as an opportunity for knocking everything down and putting up high-rise condos, maybe that's an opportunity to actually reinforce the economic potential of this area and make it a little bit more of its own identity, and really sort of work with what's there to do it.
Great. Yeah, no, those are great. Certainly done lots of work in places like that, like Caledonia Road, for example, that are interesting sort of clusters of those things. There's a range of building heights that are demonstrated through here. I think in this area, these are generally in the range of about 25 or 20 to 30 stories, I would imagine, from the look of it. But they vary throughout, and I think what's important is that they respond to the context. And certainly appreciate the comments on the existing businesses and creating opportunity for that, or actually reinforcing that. So,
thank you. And question about Dudley.
Oh, sorry. Can you repeat the question on Dudley? My apologies.
Okay, so
Jordan.
the extension of Dudley that's
Oh, yes.
over the CNR, is that pedestrian only, car traffic as well, or
No, that
everything?
my apologies. Yeah, I recall that. Yeah, that was it's illustrated right now as a vehicular connection. So a street with sidewalks and bike lanes crossing through there. And we have a note in the next slide that that's obviously something that would need to be studied from a technical perspective. We've modeled and tested it to some degree, but really that's an engineering sort of piece.
Okay, perfect. Lewis, I see you have your hand up.
Thank you. Yeah, when I looking at this and the other massing models, I'm wondering, this is based on the MTSA delimitation, I believe, not the 500, 800 meter delimitation. And that would include already established neighborhoods. I'm talking about detached houses mostly, right? And what I'm seeing is starting to see some applications from development in the areas. Basically, they buy 6 adjacent detached houses, 6 properties, and put a request, an application to set a building. It still is in the 500, 800 meters, but probably it's not in the MTSA the border, or it's outside the border, right? So, and there is probably incentive to do that. So I buy the land as a developer, 6 houses, and put a 10, 12, 15 story building, right? That's 100 units. Are any plans to bring that into the modeling, or what's the position of Markham towards that happening? Because it's going to change those areas, right? Those detached houses and neighborhoods.
Yeah. Thanks, Lewis. That's a very important question. One of the reasons why you go through a secondary planning exercise, and you do so, just to be clear on this, what we did is we tested development primarily to the west of Dudley. We set that line of change, and we looked primarily at sites that we thought might be easy to kind of go at. One of the reasons why you do a secondary planning process is to really be clear on where you think change should occur and what that change should look like. So going through an engagement process with the community, talking to various interests and stakeholders, you can define where you want that to occur and where you want to hold the line, if you will, as it relates to development. So it creates a sense of assurance for people living in areas that are deemed not to change, that they're living in a stable area. And at the same time, you signal where you're expecting change might occur and what is the appropriate level and scale of change that should occur.
Okay, thank you. I will wait for the secondary plan then.
Perfect, thank you. I see Marilyn, you have your hand up.
Yes, I do. Thank you. I'm sort of repeating what Evelyn Ellison talked about a minute ago, so I'm going to be very brief. But this is an area closer to where I live than Royal Orchard, and I know that a lot of my neighbors walk to the small stores on Doncaster and Glen Cameron. Those are a lot of very useful neighborhood small businesses, health food store, flower shop, pet store. And I think, you know, from what it looks like, all of this development is going to happen is the same thing that Joan talked about up on Royal Orchard, is that all these small businesses are going to be forced out. And I think that that's sad, because what it means is that everybody's going to get in their cars now, and they're going to have to drive farther and farther away to find the kinds of local amenities that come with a less developed area. So I think that's kind of counter to what we're trying to do with walkable communities. I remember when the World on Yonge was being developed, and we were in meetings with Fred Darvish, and he talked about all the wonderful stores that were going to be happening in the World on Yonge and how the neighborhood would be able to walk to them. And none of that happened. The stores in the World on Yonge have failed one after another. I think they've had lawsuits against World on Yonge. It's just been a disastrous retail area. And it also took away some very good long-time businesses that people now have to drive miles and miles to get to. So I don't know how you can develop an area so that you still leave room for small businesses on the street level that the community can walk to and support, because it certainly didn't happen with World on Young. That's all. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Marilyn. And, those are very good points that you and Evelyn have both raised related to small business, and really appreciate your thoughtful comments on those.
Okay, and I see we have Joan, you have your hand up.
Yes, there was a question earlier about the height of the buildings, both for Clark and of course my concern being Royal Orchard primarily, but obviously Clark is very important as well. And I think that you mentioned that they were going to be 20 to 30 stories high for this Clark area. I'm assuming that there has to be some firm numbers already for the height of these buildings, because there are assumptions made in terms of the number of residents. 20 to 30 is likely low. And the reason why I say that is because Royal Orchard, the proposal that's in now, those buildings, the max, I believe, was 59 stories, and the min was something like 25 or 27. And then if you go up to Highway 7, the minimum is 50 in the Langstaff or the bridge development, with a max of 80. And this makes considerable difference it's a considerable concern if all of these high rises are a minimum of, we'll say 25 to 30 and max potentially up to 80. So that's one concern that I would have, and I believe that it should be delineated a little bit better. As I said, the assumptions must be there because you are saying how many residents you're expecting, new residents in the area. The other thing is, I guess, it actually gets down to something that was said by the previous lady with respect to, we will now have to drive. We will actually be increasing our greenhouse gas emissions to drive to areas well, actually, first we have to get gas. We'll have lost the Husky station. We'll lose the stations up the street in Richmond Hill. Existing businesses in terms of the time that they would have to wait if they were to relocate in these buildings, well, that would be at least a few years. That would not happen. So the businesses and the places that we shop at now, what will happen to them? So we talk about the new job numbers. I think it's important to say, what are the jobs that are going to be lost from the community? And do they move somewhere else, or do they simply go out of business?
Great. No, thanks a lot, Joan. And I think that's a very good point. Yes, we do have heights for everything that was modeled here, because that is exactly how we got the numbers. And across the massing, I believe it ranges somewhere from about 20 to, well, obviously it ranges from 2 stories all the way up to about 65 right down at Steeles. So there's quite a broad range there. And the heights themselves were determined really by the ability to transition down to the neighborhood. And so they vary. In some places they're taller and some places they're shorter. But point taken, in the future on models like this, it should be important to kind of indicate the heights that are in there so that that's really clearly communicated. And I appreciate that. And again, the notion of retaining existing businesses is a very good one. And obviously, what we want to achieve through here are complete communities where people can live, work, get their local daily services and needs, and not have to get in the car and drive. And so very heartened to hear all those points, because that's exactly what we want to be achieving through an area like this, and appreciate those comments.
Okay, so I don't see any hands up. So actually, it's a good segue, as you were just talking about Steel Station. Why don't we move on down to that area and sort of walk through that? And I'd love to sort of hear feedback from everybody about the land use concept there.
Great. And I'm just reorganizing all the little boxes on my screen so I can see what I'm looking at. All right. So we've got the Steel Station area. The massing here really demonstrated the highest density mixed mixed-use center with strongest potential for new office and employment uses. We have heights that peak by the station along Yonge Street, really demonstration of Dudley neighborhood scene, a new green corridor flanked by open spaces, which supports walking and biking and is flanked by medium and low-rise development. This is an area with a lot of potential for office. Out of all the areas, this is probably the most. So office is vertically integrated into new development located in closest proximity to the steel station. And then obviously there's a bit of a coordination around the street and block pattern, which is tested here as well. Again, as with the others, these are the areas that we were pulling the numbers from. So this is a view of the area today. So you see the steel station site located to the bottom or sort of the left of your screen, the MTSA boundary in dashed red line. And this is a view looking from Steeles to the northwest, basically over top the world on Yonge. This is an illustration of the massing that was tested here. And I just do want to call out on the Markham side of things. There are a number of proposed developments which have been modeled, some of which are under appeal. And in the far left-hand side, you see some City of Toronto planning study massing, which was picked up as part of the study here. As with all of the options, the tallest towers are located in closest proximity to the station. In this case, at Yonge and Steeles, and this is where we are getting up to those 60-story heights. Joan, to clarify on that, but still demonstrating a transition right down to the low-rise neighborhoods east of Dudley there. Employment, you can see in blue there, is integrated into the base and podiums of buildings in closest proximity to the station. This is perhaps one of those views that gives the best look at what Dudley Avenue could be, or at least was tested through this massing, and that's obviously something to be confirmed and carried forward through the secondary planning, but really is an important neighborhood scene, a street that supports walking and biking, but also cars, and connects to a range of community uses, whether they be the existing Thornhill Secondary School, new community uses, located as parks as part of new development, or new consolidated park space located as part of development. And I think, as a lot of people have rightly pointed out, if you can consolidate and connect these things, they actually can deliver a lot more benefit to the existing and future communities. This is an area where a new street and block pattern was tested. And so the idea of a new north-south street to improve connectivity, take a bit of the load off of Dudley and just support access to developments. Dudley itself, and I think a number of you pointed this out rightly, is this is a place that would really need a transportation study to assess and determine what are the appropriate measures to put in place to reduce vehicular traffic, particularly across established neighborhoods, and how improvements to Dudley could help make it a more comfortable street for pedestrians and cyclists and other people using that. This also illustrates the extension of Dudley north of the rail corridor to support those active transportation linkages and really improve access to both Clark and Steeles stations. And this is something that would need to be studied from a technical perspective to understand how it would work and the grading implications along there. In terms of what was modeled for the Steeles station area here, we're looking at about 7,900 new units, or about a population of just under 16,000 people and 1,500 jobs, primarily in office uses. If you account for the existing people and jobs, and I would like to clarify, when we did do that, where we developed on an existing place of employment or an existing residence, we actually subtracted those numbers from these as part of the calculation. And so that's something I should have clarified earlier on. But if you account for the existing people and jobs, add in what was tested here, you're looking at about 22,600 people and jobs within this quadrant of the station area, and recognizing there's additional development proposed on the Markham side and on the Vaughan side and in the City of Toronto. So with that, I will go to Miro, but just some questions to think about here. Again, What are you liking or not liking about the concept? What do you think about that Dudley neighborhood seam? And I think we've heard some support for really thinking about that seam as an important place to locate new amenities. How can new development also help to benefit the neighborhood at Steeles? And we've heard a lot about local and small business and the importance of that. But also, are there other sorts of issues that we should be considering for the Steeles station area? And we heard at Clark again, thinking about small business and those existing businesses. Are there other such issues for Steeles that we should be accounting for as part of the secondary planning process? And with that, I will stop share. And I am going to switch over to Miro, and I will pan over and zoom in so that you're like me and you don't have hawk eyes, you can actually see what's on there. Great. So happy to take your thoughts, comments, questions.
Okay, perfect. I see, Corey, you have your hand up.
As I listen to all of the presentations in all of the neighborhoods, I am hearing almost nothing about protecting the quality of the existing neighborhoods. It's like, oh, they're back there. This is all the new and exciting stuff. They'll just have to put up with it. So I hear almost nothing that says this is how we will minimize the downside for the people who live there already, which is a very solid and established neighborhood, and minimal offerings in terms of things that will enhance life for those of us who've lived here. I think of North York Civic Center. Yes, down there they built incredible intensity, but in the mix, they got a theater, there's cinemas, there's a major community gathering center, there's a lavish library, there's a major pool and fitness center, and there was traffic protection for the neighborhoods that were there. Is there any thought to creating something equivalent to it in this area for those of us who live here now?
Well, thanks, Corey. And I'm sorry if that did come across in the presentation. I can tell you about a number of the things that were tested as part of this. Obviously, having strong established neighborhoods alongside new neighborhoods is critical to the success of areas such as this with new transit. And so there are a number of things. The first was treating Dudley Avenue as an important seam and place of transition between those, thinking about how Dudley could be designed in a way to minimize traffic on existing neighborhoods, designing it in a way to support pedestrians and cyclists to connect them to local amenities. In all of the options, we looked at consolidating open space and delivering new open spaces, which we tried to orient towards the Dudley or up north, the Inverlochie corridors, where they could be more easily accessed by both new, but also very importantly, existing residents along there. In all of the options in each of the station areas as well, it was very important to demonstrate how new development could accommodate those important community uses. And so throughout the presentation, we've demonstrated things such as new cultural centers, libraries, other sorts of community facilities like a community rec center in all of them. Again, we haven't been too specific, but we have made sure that we have shown how those could be accommodated with buildings scaled appropriately to accommodate those sorts of uses. So that is a range of some of the benefits that were tested. And, obviously through the secondary planning process, part of that would be understanding what are the types of community facilities that are needed, having a more fulsome engagement process with residents such as yourself to understand what's important and where you feel the needs are, and finding ways to integrate those into the policy framework so that when new development comes along, it delivers on those needs, because there's very strong policy around that to create complete communities at each of these stops. Sorry, that was long-winded, but I did want to touch on those points because it's actually very important. I can't say it enough. Development has to come with benefits for existing and future residents.
I see nothing in teal in our area. And we at this point are distant from what the current library and current community center, any kind of community Markham facilities, we are very far distant from. We have none. And I see no additions here whatsoever. So I'm not seeing quite how this would work.
Okay, well, we'll make sure to consider that going forward.
Okay, and I see we have Jordan has their hand up. Jordan?
Okay, thank you. Just to echo a bit of what was just said, but I want to amplify two things in terms of connectivity and context. So I think we're going to have to really appreciate the tremendous possibility, the advantage of Dudley, that it's not just an overpass, that it actually has the potential to really link together two communities that are separated by the rail line. And this has a tremendous potential to create a much more of a community orientation. So I would really emphasize, I know it's a transportation question, but you really have to see it. If you're talking seriously about community and anchoring communities, taking two that are sort of separated by a railway line. So really seeing that and a way to amplify that to do it. The other piece is around, again, context at Yonge and Steeles. So I happen to know from other meetings I attend on the northwest corner, where all the proposed developments all the way over to Hilda, we are currently looking at proposals for about 11,000 residential units. So I'm going to add on to that your 8,000 that you are talking about on the northeast corner. I believe it was 8,000. Correct me if I'm wrong. 7,900. Okay, close enough. I heard just the other night from the city of Toronto in terms of Centrepoint Mall that they're looking at 8,000 units. So I really would say, it's really important to look at the entire, all four quadrants here and look at the collective impact. So it's very nice to talk about these things, but what I would argue is there has to be a overall plan for the entire, all those four quadrants together. And what is the maximum that is desirable and feasible in all four quadrants combined? And if that means scaling back each of the four quadrants to make it much more livable, smaller scale, and supportable, then we have to do this. But if the problem is, like with a lot of planning and architecture, is everyone looks only at their particular building or their particular area, and they kind of ignore the context as if it didn't exist. Everyone looks at their project and says, oh, well, it's only going to generate another 100 kids going to school. Yeah, true, but there's another 6 or 7 or 12 developments that collectively are adding that multiplier. That was my point.
Right. No, thank you very much, Jordan. And, I think you're echoing words that Marilyn said earlier on, just about really planning ahead for the right level of community facilities and really aligning that with the level of development. So, yeah.
Okay, I see William, you have your hand up.
Yes, hi, thank you. Good evening. I live in the Highland Park Boulevard area, Steeles and Yonge, and I really have 2 points. One turns out to be a reiteration really of what Corey alluded to and what Marilyn has spoken about, and what all of us in this area know in terms of traffic infiltration. And GARA, the community association, has been on about this regularly, and I realize this is a carry forward to a secondary plan. But I would just like to underline my enthusiasm for something to be done about this. Because to Corey's point, what's in this for the community, as I see, is just increased traffic infiltration beyond the development along the Yonge Corridor. And really, it needs to be managed. I'm frankly waiting for the day when a child is hit on Highland Park or Dudley walking to or from school or to or from somewhere else. But I know that's been mentioned before, so I'll leave it at that. The other thing really refers nicely to the point the previous gentleman made, which is the number of residents moving in here and what's going to happen to healthcare kind of writ largely. We've gone through 2 years of pandemic where we realize that our healthcare is inadequate in many ways. Ontario has probably the worst ICU bed count per capita in the entire country. And as we move forward building all of these residents into high-rise clusters. It doesn't matter that they're high-rise, but intense clusters. I fear for what's going to happen to healthcare. And we know the sort of, I guess, labyrinthian funding that's healthcare in this country, with feds giving money to provinces, provinces deciding how they're going to spend it, and other bodies being responsible for how many doctors, nurses, and other healthcare workers are funded. So I think if possible, I would like to see carried forward to the secondary plan some consideration about what's going to happen to healthcare, and maybe even a specific run-up to what's the situation, probably when, not if, we have another pandemic or a major health crisis that puts a drain on resources. And that's really all I'd like to add. Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. I see Marilyn, you have your hand up.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so this is my neighborhood. This is my community. And I've lived here for 40 years. And, you know, I know that you gentlemen and all of Markham staff are doing your jobs, and I'm sure that you're doing them to the best of your ability. And this is not a personal criticism in any way, shape, or form. So please understand that. I think that what the province is doing to this area is absolutely appalling. The fact that they are without any coordination, as the gentleman earlier said, with no coordination at this major, major intersection between Toronto, Vaughan, and Markham, and York Region. Let's not leave York Region out of this. There is no communication, no joint planning, and what is being created all in this area is a concrete jungle. And as I said, I've lived here for 40 years. I've been on the Residents Association executive for 20 years. I know a lot of people in this neighborhood, and I don't think I know one who actually still wants to live here when all of this is going on. So, you know, what does that tell you? When you've got an established neighborhood and people cannot wait to get out because they see what's coming, and it's not going to be a nice place to live. It's not going to be a nice place to live along any of these transit corridors, these massive developments. It's just a very unhappy scenario. It's going to be like living in Hong Kong or next to Hong Kong when what you bought into was a neighborhood. So I think it's pretty sad. And I know that it's not your fault and there's not much you can do about it except take into account what some of the comments have been tonight. But I sure hope this is an election issue, because this is my election issue. I don't know if it is going to be for the whole province, but it's my election issue. And I know a lot of people who are going to vote the same way. Thank you, gentlemen, for your time and attention tonight.
No, thank you for your comments. Just to keep moving on, I see we're getting close on time. I see, Joan, you have your hand up.
Yes, I just want to add to what Marilyn said. She's been here 40, or her family's been here 40 years. We've been here 33 years. And it seems that the benefits will perhaps come to those who move in, although frankly, I would not want to be any resident in a 80 or a 65 or a whatever story tower. The other thing is, getting back, Craig, to what you had said before, that you would show the delineation of the high rises, which would be great in terms of what the heights are intended or proposed to be. But you also said that you had subtracted out the losses in the jobs. I think it's important to also make it clear how many jobs potentially would be lost by the new developments, and these businesses that would not survive have to move elsewhere, whatever. The only other comment that I had, and I guess Jordan sort of beat me to the punch, my concern in terms of hospitals. The pandemic has taught us a very valuable lesson. Unfortunately, even without pandemic conditions, the type of development that we're talking about, if we start with the 80,000 between the bridge and the high tech, and then we move down, I don't know, however many this might be, we'll say 80,000 with the Center Point, the Clark, the Steeles, the Vaughan side. You're now talking about a fairly large city, if you will, within the confines of a very small space. What do we do? Are we building new hospitals, fire and services as well? Heaven forbid if there is a fire in any of these high rises, but those are sort of the necessities of life. We have an aging community now. Perhaps the people moving in won't require as much hospitalization, but the reality is, of course, we need hospitals. And what are the plans for that? Community centers are great. Libraries are great as well, theaters, entertainment. But when people are ill and they need to go to a hospital, where are they going to go? There's an awful lot of people to be considered. Thank you.
Great. Thanks a lot, Joan. And you captured a problem that we're facing right across the province and the country. Lots of growth, making sure we have services for them, but very important consideration.
Okay, and I see we have Evelyn, you have your hand up. Evelyn? Okay, that may have been a latent hand. Okay, we can always come back to that. I see no more hands at this point, so I'm going to suggest, Craig, if you can sort of go back and we'll move on to the into the next part.
Great. I will.
Thank you.
Stop share. And then go back up here. Have I pulled up the right one?
Yes.
Okay. Great. All right. So this is really just a summary, but also capturing some of the ways looking forward. And so overall, we demonstrated a lot of development potential on the Markham side here. And again, I do acknowledge that this is just showing the Markham side. It needs to work on both sides, and we need to be considering the bigger picture between all the different municipalities. What was tested showed basically the potential for about 17,000 new units and about 35,000 new people and almost 4,000 new jobs through here. For a total, if you think about the existing people and jobs, subtracting those that were displaced from the development, we're looking at about 45,900 people and about 7,000 jobs for a total of 52,900 people and jobs along the corridor here. If anything, and we've certainly heard a lot more tonight, which is actually very, very useful. And I would like to say I found a lot of thoughtful comments tonight. I do a lot of these, and I think we heard some really thoughtful commentary tonight, which can help to inform future study. But some of the things that have been identified so far are really thinking about Dudley and obviously Inverlochy Street, the Dudley Street extension in Inverlochy, how those can actually be designed in a way that is safe for people living in existing neighborhoods, future neighborhoods, supports multimodal transportation, connects across the rail corridor. Thinking about getting that critical mix, we heard a lot tonight about the importance of having a live workplace where people don't have to get in their cars and drive away. And so thinking about how we can attract and retain jobs, whether they be office or other sorts of uses. Implementation strategies related to employment incentives to attract those. But also one of the things, and I'm glad I heard it highlighted tonight, but thinking about consolidated parkland strategy. How can we not have just small little parks that aren't useful, but actually larger, more useful parks, and making sure that we also have community facilities that come in along with new development to benefit existing residents, but also serve future residents of the area. So very glad to hear a lot of the thinking around that tonight. And that is certainly a recommendation that's carried forward as part of the future study. The employment lands redevelopment at Clark, again, very thoughtful commentary around the existing uses that are there and the role that they play. And that is a particular study that was identified as well for significant level of consideration, just to really understand the nature of that. The redevelopment of the York housing site at Royal Orchard and how that can integrate alongside the neighborhood is something to be considered. and just thinking in general about the integration of parking and transportation as a whole, which we knew would be part of the study. But again, those are issues that were raised, and so I'm really heartened to hear the commentary around that tonight. You know, overall, I think a lot of what we heard was just, you know, the importance of thinking about complete communities here that really serve and deliver benefit to the existing neighborhoods, and what are the range of facilities and things that need to come into play to do that. And you know, that's certainly something that everyone's looking forward to tackling as part of the secondary planning process. And so really sort of appreciate that there. And so with that, I do think we have next steps. We are finalizing this study along with a report that will conclude the findings of this. We'll also capture key themes that we've heard. So we've tried to capture everything that we heard tonight, and I hope we captured it correctly on Miro. That will be fed into thinking about the Yonge Corridor secondary planning process, and then will help to really inform that work now. And so in terms of next steps, I guess just we'd like to hear from you. How would you like to be, and I see there's one last hand up, so I want to make sure that we get to that. But I think a big question is, how would you like to be engaged going forward? And how do we want to sort of continue to kind of engage you through the secondary planning process? And so your thoughts on that would be very much appreciated. And Daryl, I'll let you go to the raised hands.
Okay, so
See a few popping up.
I see a few hands that have come up. So Evelyn?
Should I stop sharing my screen? We'll just
Yes,
go to
I
full, or do you
think-
want to? Sorry, Evelyn, go ahead.
Okay, no problem. I thank you for your work, but I think it's just 2 hours that we could ask some questions. I think it's not enough to do a complete study. I think we have to have another meeting. I think it's very important because not too many people are here. We had other representatives, I think, of the Residents Association, most of them here, but I think the public has to know, even the other people have to know and understand. Some people would not understand what's going on. So I would suggest we have an email that people can send comments, that this is presented on a video or whatever you do the presentation, that people can send emails. And I think what is also missing of this is like,
Oh, Evelyn, are you still here?
yes,
Sorry, you cut out, Evelyn.
okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. I was saying about not everybody's going to go on the subway. Yes. What about climate change? We didn't see anything about climate change. Of course, a long corridor, green space will be helping. Yes. What about the development to mitigate those effects? Many of the green areas that have proposed buildings on the rendering, it's not. Markham has an increase of population of around 200. How many people in total is going to be just on Yonge Street and Langstaff? I think we already have the increase of population. So the rest of Markham and Bond don't need to increase the population. Everything is on Yonge Street. So I think has to be spread out more, this overpopulation, not with the excuse of the subway. Yes, because the subway in certain parts is already over capacity. So we are dreaming, wishing to put many people there. And why everything on Yonge Street? That's my question.
Okay. Thank you very much, Evelyn. And I think, you know, I know the region and cities are thinking very carefully about all the growth and where it should go and how it relates to transit and existing services. You know, I can't stress enough that this is actually, you know, you're absolutely right. There needs to be far more time to engage around the types of things that we were talking about tonight. And I really do want to emphasize that this was just an initial sort of testing and study. So the city knew the types of issues that we would need to consider, or they would need to consider as part of the secondary planning process along here. That process is going to have lots of opportunities for engagement. It's going to be most likely a multi-phased process, and we'll have the ability to get into a much broader range of issues. And, you know, I love hearing you talk about connecting this to climate change, connecting this to other sorts of important considerations. We heard a lot about health as well. And so, you know, that's really the ideal process to engage in those discussions. You know, it will only benefit from, you know, folks such as yourself participating in that.
And Craig, could I ask, can you go to the next slide? Because that'll help on the rest of the question that was asked. So on this slide, I just want to flag, you'll see our email addresses. So as you were just asking about providing additional feedback, please reach out to me, reach out to our consultant team. We want to hear your feedback. I really appreciate all of the feedback that we've heard tonight. I see we have 2 more hands to go through, but I just wanted people to sort of see this. This presentation is also going to be posted on our website, right where you got the link for tonight's Zoom meeting. So we'll try and get that up hopefully tomorrow. And that way you'll be able to get a copy of this presentation, and we really want to hear from you. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jordan. I see you have your hand up.
Yes, thanks. Okay, you headed off one of my questions, which was when can we get the copy of the slides? So thank you for that. We'll look for that tomorrow. I think the goal, while we're looking at all of Yonge Street, all the way from Steeles up to Royal Orchard, we have to recognize, and you've done this, there are really three communities. And therefore, if you want more engagement from local residents, you really have to now take it down and break it up. And maybe it's only 2. Maybe the Yonge and Clark are close enough that you could engage focus groups and other discussions with local ratepayers associations, and they can help to bring people to that. So you can actually have a much more focused things. It's not that I don't care about Royal Orchard, but you know, I'm not that close to it, and what resonates with me more is obviously what's local to me. So you'll get much more engagement and participation if you are able to break it down. And again, working with the local ratepayer groups as a partner to help you to get them engaged in this, and you'll have, I think, a much better final product out of this that will address all of these issues and really highlight what are these existing communities and what do they believe is going to happen as a result of this.
Great, thanks, Jordan. And we certainly recognize, you know, a challenge of this not having had all those opportunities, but still wanting to make sure that you know, we were testing these things to inform the secondary plan. But you're absolutely right. The best studies find a way to look at the big picture, but also get very granular within the communities to understand the details and how they all work together.
Okay, so I'm aware that we are just a little bit over time. I see there's one last hand. Joan, is it a quick question? Otherwise, I'd be happy if you wanted to either call me or drop me an email as well.
It's just a quick question. We are talking about Royal Orchard as a potential TOC, and I'm interested in knowing what the difference would be in the area around Royal Orchard being developed without a subway station versus with a subway station. It's certainly not something that Craig could answer this evening, but I would like to see what the differences are in terms of the intensification, the height of the buildings, how many buildings, so on and so forth. Clearly, our mayor is very interested in having it as a TOC, but it seems as if there are serious implications by having it classified as a TOC.
So thank you for that comment. Just to clarify, I understand there's interest in having it as a station, but TOC itself has a different framework attached to it. Transit-oriented communities is kind of density, or there's the provincial program as well. So just to sort of flag that, but these are all things that we need to understand. We also need to understand where the province is going as it relates to the Royal Orchard station. So that's all of those core elements we're going to have to look at through the upcoming secondary plan, and hopefully we'll see decisions coming out of the province on that station.
Sorry, I didn't realize that. I thought that it was contingent on the fact we had it. So we're doomed is basically what you're saying. First we had the subway underneath us, and now we're going to have the buildings. Thank you.
Yes, this is one of the reasons we're doing this study, is to get ahead in order to lay down a land use vision and a fabric for this area. It helps inform where things should go, where they shouldn't go. And that's why we're doing this upfront work, and it's going to move into a secondary plan. I see there's no other hands, and I want to get everyone out. I really appreciate everyone spending this evening with us. We've gotten a great amount of thoughtful feedback. I'm just looking at some of my notes as I'm going through. And of course, I'm going to be looking back to that Miro board software that we've been populating all of the great feedback and stickies and sort of looking at that. So one, I want to thank everyone for joining us this evening. Great amount of feedback. We have a lot of things to think about as we move forward, wrap this study up, and then start the detailed, really the rolling up the sleeves on the secondary plan, which is where we're really going to be looking at transportation, master environmental servicing, all of these issues that we're hearing about. Like, I'm just looking at just some of the pieces that we've heard tonight around parks, parkland, walkability, the need for community amenities such as schools, services, restaurants, healthcare. How do we deal with existing business, and how does elements of the areas transform over time? How do we look as Dudley as a connector and a community connector, as well as looking at other core elements that are also outlined in our official plan around looking at climate change, et cetera. So I really want to thank everyone. You've given us a lot to think about. It's been a great evening. As you can see on the screen, if people have copied down the email or taken a screenshot of it, otherwise we will have the PowerPoint or this presentation up on our website tomorrow. And please feel free to reach out to us. With that, I want to wish everyone a wonderful evening, and thank you to everybody. Thank you to our consultant team, and also greatly thank you to our members of council for being with us this evening, as well as to all of our staff that have been here to help support the evening. Thank you. Have yourselves a great night.
Thanks, everyone. Really appreciate the conversation.
Thank you.